Welcome again to Cottage Talk. I am Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is Suhail and Tony. This is our post-match show of Fulham's victory against West Ham. I am calling Fulham win ugly against West Ham. I think that's a good way to talk about it. It's not a bad thing, and that'll be part of our discussion today. But we have a lot to talk about in regards to this victory. What's great about it, and also will be part of our discussion, is that Fulham are currently 10th in the Premier League. Who would have thought of that maybe even, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago? They're now 10th. And that changes a lot for Fulham Football Club for the second half of the season. I'm going to say that right now. So we have a lot to talk about with the guys, and we're going to get to that in a second. Just want to mention, as always, if you are watching live with us and have not subscribed on YouTube, we're live on X and on Cottage Talk Facebook page. Please do subscribe on YouTube. And if you haven't checked out the Cottage Talk Patreon page, please do check that out as well. Besides this post-match show, the post-match show is free, so you can certainly watch and listen to that, but other episodes that our podcast will be exclusive on the Cottage Talk Patreon page. So please do go there and become a member. All right, guys, let's get to it before we go on and talk about the match. Tony, how you doing? How are you feeling after that victory yesterday?
I'm great, thank you. Good to see you both again. Always good. Listen, obviously buoyant. That's 3 in a row. Can't remember the last time we won 3 in a row, actually. Listen, we talked about how important it was, these 3 fixtures that Fulham, got the 9 points, and fair play. They've gone out and they've delivered. Maybe not necessarily from a performance perspective, but at this stage of the season, it really is about getting those points on the board. And we've achieved it. We've done it. Now we can move into the new year and focus on, what needs to be done from that point onwards. But, all credit to the players and Marco Silva for digging it out and which has been a difficult period because of the players that we've lost and the injuries that we've had. They've done really, really well. So yeah, very happy, very happy.
I'm very happy too, Tony. I'm glad that you talked about it, because I don't think we should be talking and doing this show without mentioning the fact that Fulham are without 5 key players. Not 1, 2, or 3. We're talking 5. 2 from injury and 3 at AFCON. So we're going to talk about it coming up next. Find a way to win and basically keep things going while these guys are either injured or away, I think just gives them this platform. That's why some of the topics we're going to be talking about are going to lead to that. They've given themselves a platform.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I think, as I said, it was by no means a classic yesterday. A bit like the Forest game. Not, there wasn't too much, in it. But I know we're going to talk about it. Suddenly, this Fulham side have brought a little bit of resilience to themselves and have started to win football matches ugly, if you want to call it that way. So, they found a way yesterday when it looked like it was going to be a drab 0-0. They found a way, and it's a good place to be, Russ, when you're not playing particularly well, but you're picking up points and you're getting results. That always holds you in good stead. So, look, as I said, moving in, very happy. We owe Crystal Palace massively, so I'm really looking forward to that game and getting that one on. But we're in a good place at the moment. Good place.
We are, and that's a good thing to say as we head into the new year. So, Hale, how you doing?
Absolutely, great. It was all the better for yesterday, and again, I'm looking forward to New Year's Day. When we play at Selhurst Park. I think Tony's really hit the nail on the head. We should put it in perspective. The 3 wins were against 3 of the bottom 4. So, we should be expecting to win those. But we did it without 5 first team, what I consider first team starters. And that's the real sort of prize out of all of this, not just the 9 points, but the hope that we're going to get a lot better in the next month or so when those AFCON boys come back and when Rodrigo Muniz and quite importantly, and we'll talk about him later, I know Ryan Sessegnon returns, because I think he's, a key asset in this. So, yeah, great end to 2025. Looking forward to 2026.
Okay, excellent stuff. And I agree with your sentiment. And I'm glad that Tony talked about this. You talked about it as well. You already mentioned it. I know who they got these victories against, Suhail. But what's interesting about it, when you looked at the fixtures, and I said this to you yesterday, I knew that these three matches were at the end. And I'm thinking, as long as they can get these points, then everything should, I wouldn't say offset what had happened prior, but can basically put everything on an even keel and now give yourself a platform. They needed to win those three. They had to win those three, and they did. Now, it's what's great about it is now you can look at moving forward. If say they only got 3 points, we're talking relegation battle. Okay, 6 points, you're still teetering. What's great about this, and I hope you guys agree with me on this. I would never say relegation is out of the question, but you and I talked about this yesterday. At 26 points, it's really not in the conversation at this point. Would you agree with me on that?
Totally. It's 26 points, and we're not even halfway stage of the season. I think that is, I can't see us getting dragged back into a relegation battle now. I think 36 points is enough to stay up. 10 more points from the remaining 20 games. Come on, we're going to do that. I think the question now, and this might be a bit more controversial, is how far can we go up the table? I mean, can we now start challenging for Europe? And I think this January transfer window will be critical because we get a striker, someone who can actually sub in for Raul or start instead of Raul and have Raul come in. I think we can actually sort of start again. I don't want to start pushing or poking the bear, but I really do think we could start looking at a top 8 place if we can get that striker.
Okay, and that's also when we talk about in our car start talking points. That's going to lead to us talking about January because I think it is vital. Everything you just said, we're going to talk about coming up shortly because if they add, I'm talking about Fulham. If Fulham add the striker, a winger, maybe a central midfielder in January, hopefully earlier than later, a lot can change because then you're adding 5 other players at some point too. Everything can change. And I'll mention who it's actually on when we get there when we go through the Cottage talking points. That's going to be the end of our Cottage talking points, but I want to start with the beginning. So let's start with why I called this show Winning Ugly is a Good Sign for Fulham, because I think it is, Tony, and you and I talked about it. The one thing you've been harping on since I've been doing this show with you, clean sheet, right? Finding a way to win. All of this is true. The fact that we'll talk about, did they play great? No, but they found a way to win. And they, as we're talking about, defensively solid. Did West Ham have opportunities? Yes, they absolutely had opportunities. But in the end, Fulham did enough to get all 3 points, and they were clinical when they needed to. And they had a couple players there that really made the difference in the end. We're talking about Harry Wilson and, of course, Raul. So for me, sometimes you have to win ugly. I think it's a sign of a good team. I'm not putting Fulham in that category yet, but I think they're on their way if they can win matches like this. I'm talking about Fulham. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think when you're in a situation that Marco Silva faces with the fact that he's got these 3 players away and the injuries that he's having to deal with, he's had to really sort of, dig deep with the players. The players have had to dig deep as well. And in terms of how he sets us up, I understand why he's been a little bit more cautious, which is why we didn't really get a performance against West Ham and similarly yesterday as well. And winning ugly isn't something you normally associate with Fulham Football Club, right? It's not something that we normally do. But what we did yesterday, whilst it wasn't pretty at times, we dominated the ball, Russ. And I think when you dominate the ball, you give yourselves an opportunity. And also the fact that we also kept a clean sheet, our second, by the way, and we've kept more clean sheets now this season than we did of the whole of last season. And we've still got, 19, 20 games to go. And I think one of the main reasons for that is the introduction of Cuenca. And I know, people might be thinking, I'm talking rubbish, but I promise you, Cuenca is our best defender by a country mile, right? He's very calm on the ball. He makes good decisions. He's technically sound. He doesn't go gung-ho. He always makes sure that he checks his shoulders and he's positionally right. And I think what he's done is he's actually calmed Anderson down a little bit.
Yep.
And, you know, when Anderson and Bassey play, I always have this feeling that both of them have taken something before the game, you know, like an overload of Lucozade or something. And they're both like so hyped up. And sometimes it shows in their game. And I think that causes a bit of panic across us. But in the last 2 games that Cuenca's played and come in, I think he's just calmed everything down. And the fact that he was our most progressive player yesterday, I think tells you everything that you need to know. He dominated the ball, he won his tackles, he won his headers, and he gave us that platform. And I think that at the moment, you know, Marco Silva can't change. Whatever happens now, he cannot change at the moment that back four the way that it is.
Okay,
Simple
okay. You're already about to lead us to another talking point. That's okay. That's what I love about you, Tony. We're in sync. So we'll talk about Cuenca in more detail coming up in Calvin Bassey. Over to you, Suhail. What are your thoughts
about the game or about Cuenca generally?
No. We'll get to Cuenca coming up next. About winning ugly.
Yeah, I
think matches ugly. I think it's a sign of a good team.
Yeah, it's a sign of a good team, but there's also something to put in perspective here. And this is the caveat to what I said earlier, because remember I said earlier, let's not get carried away. There's three teams in the bottom 4, but Burnley aside, who I thought we could have won that 6-2 easily. Nottingham Forest came to the Cottage full of momentum. They were the informed side at the time they came to the Cottage, and we beat them 1-0. We go to West Ham, the London Stadium, and they are desperate for a win.
Yep.
They are desperate. They think they can get out. I was looking at some of the West Ham, podcasts, and they were treating us like, this is the first of the must-win. We're going to win this game. We were the stepping stone. Remember to the launch pad.
I listened to the same stuff.
Yeah, and it just made me laugh because I think you shouldn't be going into this game expecting a win. You should be going in there thinking we are going to work really hard to get the win. So winning ugly yesterday for me was we were winning against a team that's desperate. It was desperate in front of its own fans, and we contained them. And I don't want to get onto the Cuenca thing because I do think Tony's got a big point here, but I think we just looked very comfortable at times. We had a couple of scares. Don't get me wrong. There were a couple of Jared Bowen scares that we had, but for the most part, we looked comfortable. It looked like and as you say, we contained them. We didn't have any great moments of magic. We had a couple of 2 or 3 shots that you thought, oh, okay, they were good, but we contained them. And most of all, we just silenced them after they scored. I didn't ever once think nothing. They had nothing. I just didn't ever think, oh, they're going to equalize. I thought, oh, we've done a great job of damping stuff down.
No, very good. And Tony, I want to go back to you've already reiterated this, and Suhail has already mentioned this as well. When you look at how Fulham were set up, and I'm going to talk about Marco Silva coming up next as well. I actually think this is by design, and I think you've already talked about the fact that you have these players out. You're going with a double pivot. We knew that they would go with a double pivot, right? And actually, Suhail mentioned to me he thought that Lukic actually offered us something going forward. But you're going with a more defensive setup, okay? I think this is the way he wanted to play. I think it's also the way he probably wanted to play this against Nottingham Forest. He's basically playing to what he has available to him. Well, what are your thoughts that what we saw was by design?
Yeah, look, I think that the problem is, Russ, is that he's relying on players to perform ultimately in whatever system he sets us out in. He needs players to perform. I think actually there were pros and cons to having Luca and Berger both playing yesterday. Okay. The pros were that obviously, they gave us a little bit more solidity in midfield. But then the con against that is when we were trying to break out into the final third, we were quite limited at times, especially because, Kevin is not performing. No matter how much we're trying to get a tune out of him, it's just not happening for him at the moment. And I was looking at the pitch yesterday, and I was looking at it and thinking that pitch looks so tight. It looks so like the players it looked very crammed. The space was limited, and that was probably because West Ham played quite narrow as well. But what was very impressive for me yesterday, finally, after weeks and weeks of talking about it, is Marco Silva actually, it seemed to me like he told Raul, I don't want you dropping anywhere else. I want you working just outside the 18-yard box and getting yourself into the 18-yard box. And I think he did that a lot more yesterday. So it gave us a lot more of an option in terms of, being able to play the ball forward, him holding it higher up the pitch and allowing us to get a little bit higher. So I think that ultimately, Marco Silva got it spot on. I was thinking at some point he needs to bring Kearney on, because I just felt that the game was not getting away from us.
He waited very late for that, by the way, Tony.
He did wait very late. And ultimately, obviously, once Raul scored, I think that, that pretty much, that was it for West Ham. I never thought for 1 minute they were going to get back into the game. So, credit to Marco Silva for, sticking with it and trusting in it. But I think ultimately, you still got to rely on the players once they're out there to do their jobs. And I think yesterday, in the main, they did that.
Okay, and I've now transitioned to us talking about Marco and winning the coaching battle, and that was a key when we were doing our preview show that I had, and it's something that I happen to do pretty much every week, because I think it's vital that he gets his tactics right. And so, hail to you, I think he absolutely did. But I will also say, and you listened to the same stuff I did from the West Ham perspective, I can just tell you they are livid with Nuno because he did not start a striker.
Yeah.
So was he complicit with this? Was he trying too hard to try to outwit? I believe he's a friend of Marco's, or another manager that they're friendly with, right? So I think that I saw this when he was at Nottingham Forest. It seems like they really go to battle against each other, try to outwit each other. Maybe he was trying too hard because it didn't work for them. And I want to give Marco credit for setting Fulham up correctly. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, Marco definitely won the coaching battle, but Nuno definitely equally lost it abysmally. I mean, he didn't play Wilson, and you saw what happened when Wilson came on. All of a sudden, they started to look like, they were going to, they were having the attacks. He was causing Cuenca and Anderson some problems. But there were other things that Nuno did, which I thought were absolutely mystifying. He brought off Magassa and brought on Thomas Souček. And I have no idea what on earth he was thinking there. Magassa was actually causing us a few issues. And what was Souček going to do? On the Fulham side, I thought Marco handled it really well. Josh King made I think, a very significant difference. West Ham didn't quite know what to do with him because he was flitting all over the place. And they didn't quite know what to do with him. And he was the guy that was causing them all sorts of problems on the left-hand side of the field. So good for Marco. I also liked, it was a real nice statement when he brought on Issa Diop. Because he was basically saying, we're closing it up and we're using one of your ex-players to close the shop up, which I thought was a nice little statement for him to make. No, definitely won the coaching battle. One of his, I thought really, really handled it all very, very well.
Okay, very good. All right, guys, let's now move on. And let's talk about what we were just talking about before. And Suhail, I'll go to you first.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Cuenca and Bassi. Does Marco Silva have a problem when Calvin Bassey returns? Now, we've already talked a little bit about it. Let's talk a little deeper into it. We talked about the partnership. I've seen people with comments that it's a very good combination of Anderson and Cuenca. Tony's talked about it. We're talking about it now. What does Marco do when Calvin Bassey is ready to return? I'm going to look at this two ways. I'll go to you and Tony first of all, with this question, okay? I'll ask you first, I'll go to Tony. I know it's a limited time. Who's the better defender?
That's a more tricky question. Who's the better defender? I think it's a very nice headache to have, and I would not drop Cuenca when Bassey returns, because I think it's Cuenca's place to lose now, as opposed to him being the sort of. He should stay. I agree, Chris. Should stick with Cuenca and Anderson. The one thing I really like about Cuenca is that he seems very confident on the ball. if you notice, he never really passes back that often. And when he gets the ball and there's space ahead of him, he starts running into it, like moving everyone up the pitch. He's got a real confidence, and he's not scared to try the passing that really is required from the back of defense. So I personally would stick with Cuenca. It's very difficult to say who's the better defender because they both got their strengths. Bassey's a great tackler, and he's got he's got a really good physical presence. Creates a lot of problems for strikers trying to barge past him or to try to shoulder him off. But at this point in time, Cuenca should stay because he's played well. It's his shirt to lose as opposed to him being the understudy now.
Okay. It's an interesting conundrum, Tony. I have a feeling I know who you think is the better defender, but feel free to share that. But I've seen this in sports, in different sports. I've heard the adage, you should never lose your shirt, right? You know, if you're injured or there's a reason why you're out, it should be yours when you return. I disagree. I think it should be the player that gives you the best chance to win. So I'll ask you it this way. Which player gives you the best chance to win? Is it Calvin Bassey or is it Cuenca? I think you're going to go with Cuenca.
I agree with what Suhail said. I think that ultimately, you know, they're two very different defenders, and they both bring very different things as defenders. I think the way the game is played in this day and age, I think you do need to have a ball player in your back four, someone that's comfortable on the ball. And as Suhail rightly says, someone that can carry the ball and not keep going sideways and backwards, but has that opportunity to play a progressive pass. And I think Cuenca does that, Russ. And I think there's two things also that, you know, that we need to pick up on is that yesterday, you know, even there were a few sort of heart in the mouth moments between, you know, both of them. And that's a partnership that's growing. But what I noticed is, our offside trap was so much better yesterday than it's been in weeks. I mean, the amount of times we caught West Ham offside yesterday was unbelievable. And that's come down by somebody. And I put that in large down to Anderson stepping up a little bit more as a leader, but also Cuenca reading the game and having the ability to read the game from a defensive point of view. And also he's much more disciplined as a defender than Calvin Bassey. Calvin Bassey, as I said, has these moments in games where I think he gets bored. It's almost like he wants to go on a 15-yard run and suddenly starts carrying the ball and breaks out of defense and goes on these. He's not in the team to do that. First and foremost, he needs to be there defending and making sure that we keep a clean sheet. The second thing is that yesterday, I don't know if you realised it, but from a defensive involvement, Cuenca had the most clearances in our back line, but he did not make one tackle yesterday. And that tells you everything you need to know, because he's so composed on the ball and he puts himself in the right positions all the time that he doesn't need to make tackles. He just needs to make sure that we stay solid. And at the moment, in the last two games, the fact of the matter is the stats speak for themselves. We've kept 2 clean sheets in a row. Yeah. And that has to count for something. So I think that, you know, there'll be games where, you know, you'll need Calvin Bassey's physicality. Absolutely. Right. And there might be games when you can play all 3 of them.
Sure.
But at the moment, as Suhail rightly says, you can't mess about with a team that's kept 2 clean sheets.
Right.
So that's where I'm at on it.
Right. And as Suhail said, and I want to reiterate this, Suhail's right. It's a great problem to have, Suhail. It's a wonderful problem to have. And I think last year at one point, you know, we were talking about Calvin Bassey being Fulham's best defender, and I would agree with that last season. And I think he is someone that is a very good defender. I think you just happen to have an interesting situation with 2 different types of defenders, and maybe you can mix and match them. But right now, I'm looking at Cuenca and thinking, you got to stick with him. And nothing to do with Calvin Bassey. I happen to like him a lot as a player. I just, looking at the situation, just thinking, who gives you a better chance to win right now? And it would be Cuenca, Suhail.
Yeah, no, I agree. And as I say, I watched the interview with Cuenca after the West Ham game, and he looks like he really enjoys being a Fulham player. That's another great thing about him. He's on the field and he's enjoying it. So, you know, I agree with all the sentiments that have been said. The only reason I say you can't answer that question about who's a better defender is that they both have different strengths. And Tony's pointed some out already. I just think when Bassi returns, he should not be slotted straight back in.
Sure.
Cuenca and Anderson should remain the centre-back pairing until something persuades Marco otherwise. And at this point in time, I think it's a really good centre-back pairing. And Tony makes a great point on the offside stuff. I mean, the amount of there were like 2 or 3 chances yesterday, very dangerous chances that all sort of fizzled out because the offside flag went up. And the commentators themselves were pointing out that Cuenca had stepped up when the ball had been played forward. It was a really clever move and you'll recall a couple of goals that we conceded last season. They weren't offside because of Bassi, because Bassi stayed back. So a great point, Tony. That was a fantastic point to make.
No, that's good. And like you said, being a cerebral defender, Tony, it's something that I think you're reiterating. We're not saying that Calvin Bassi isn't. We're just saying that right now Cuenca has upped the ante on that he's really thinking with this. And I've seen Calvin Bassi be extremely smart too. So it's not about him. It's just that right now we're seeing Cuenca really do all the right things. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that. Again, I'm very fond of Calvin Bassi, and as we're talking about, maybe it was an unfair question, who's the better defender, because they both offer different qualities, and Calvin Bassi offers a lot. I think it's, to really finish this up, a good problem to have. But Marco I think will have a headache when he returns. He's got a decision to make. I think the right decision is to stick with Cuenca because he's playing well. All right, guys, talking about decisions and problems, let's talk about another one. So when Ryan Sessegnon returns, and I'm going to be honest, and anyone that hasn't listened or watched, before the season began, I said he's going to be your player of the season. Now, I'm probably not going to be right on that, but Ryan Sessegnon has been very good this season. And Ryan Sessegnon, with Robinson returning, now probably will be further up the pitch, will be a winger. I know you and I talked about this, so hell, you prefer that. I'm sorry to put words in your mouth, but I know where you're probably going to go with this. The problem we've got right now is that it's called the Kevin problem. So does Marco Silva have a problem when Ryan Sessegnon returns, Tony? Because right now we're watching a player that Fulham have spent a lot of money on that has a lot of talent. We can see the talent. It just isn't working. And as you said many times, to me personally, it just might be for next season. So what do you do? What do you do when Ryan Sessegnon returns?
Well, my stance on it is very simple. I think Marco Silva needs to take Kevin out of the firing line, because at the moment, as we spoke about earlier, it's just not happening for him. And, he's still a young boy. He's 22 years old,
22 years developing,
old, still learning. And if Marco Silva's got anything about him from a man management point of view, he needs to, pull Kevin aside and say, do you know what? I need to protect you for the next sort of 3 or 4 games, and I'm going to take you out the firing line, and either make a decision on sending him out on loan somewhere, or just putting him back on the bench and keep working with him at training and keep trying to get him to do the right things, because look, it's not happening for him. Yesterday, it felt like we were playing with 10 players at times, even though, believe it or not, we were so dominant down the left-hand side. But that was mainly because of Anthony Robinson. That wasn't because of Kevin in any way, shape or form. It was because of the unbelievable, work ethic and energy that Anthony Robinson was giving us down that side. But for me, once Ryan Sessegnon is back fit, it's a natural slot into that left-hand side, because I think him and Anthony Robinson down that left side could be really problematic for so many teams, because they can also interchange. So, if Anthony goes on one of those gut-busting runs, he doesn't have to worry about making a gut-busting run back and get caught defensively. Ryan Sessegnon can just drop in, cover that space, and which he has done, more than adequately for us already this season. And I think it just gives us great balance. But also with the January window coming up, Russ, there's a player at Tottenham that I'd be all over right now, and I'd be getting him to try and get pen to paper and get him over, because I think someone like Brendan Johnson would add a lot of quality to this group. And he's a player that I think Marco Silva would get so much out of. I really do. So for me, take Kevin out the firing line for now, keep working with him, and bring Sess in, and strengthen in January. That's what I would do.
Okay, very good. All right. Your thoughts, Suhail.
Totally agree. I'm not sure I'd send Kevin out on loan. But I don't want to be too disrespectful because I was actually defending Kevin earlier on, but he's beginning to make Steve Marley look like value for money. It really is. It's quite embarrassing to watch it. The thing that really bothered me yesterday was the lack of effort from Kevin. It looked like at times he wasn't even trying to play well. So I think a spell on the subs bench is a great idea. The great thing about Ryan Sessegnon is that he has a knack of being in the right place at the right time. And that's why I think he worked really well with Robinson. I could see Robinson and him working well, and then Robinson flying down the left and Ryan Sessegnon moving towards the middle. Just being in the right place at the right time to cause a problem. I think it'd be a great team if you had Ryan in at that stage. So that's what I would do. On the Brennan Johnson issue, the one thing I'd say, Tony, I'm not sure we'll be able to afford Brennan Johnson if Tottenham want to sell him, but what is it about Tottenham and what they do to players? Like, look what Ryan Sessegnon, João Palhinha, now Brennan Johnson. And what are they doing to these players who are great players? And they're turning them into, I don't know. I mean, it must be the biggest graveyard for a lot of players that go there. But back to Fulham, Ryan Sessegnon all the way from me for Kevin. I think Kevin needs a spell on the bench. There's going to be a change anyway because Chukwueze's going to be coming back. And so he's going to be taking that spot anyway. But I have to say I'm very, very disappointed with the way Kevin's started this season.
Okay, excellent stuff. All right, final topic for the Cottage Talking Points, and I think it's an extremely important one. That's why I'm ending with it. So Fulham, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, is 10th. And now things have changed, okay? Fulham have given themselves a platform to potentially do something special. So as I've been very critical of Marco, and I'll continue to be about the contract situation, I'm putting that aside because right now the biggest situation Fulham have is to see what they're going to do for the rest of the season. So Marco's going to be the manager, and hopefully Marco will be the manager the rest of the season. But give him the best tools moving forward. 5 players will be coming back. So let's end here, guys. I think this is where the rubber meets the road. Everything for me has now switched. I talked a lot about Marco. It's now all about the cons. It is time, I shouldn't say, is it time? It is time for the cons to invest in January. Tony, it's now. It has to be now. And the way I look at it is my father was an accountant. I know that there could be potential, say, financial ramifications. But as a son of an accountant, I know where there's a will, there's a way to basically make the most out of the situation that you have. There are ways, I wouldn't say to get around situations, not go over the line, but manipulate the situation to get the most out of the financial dealings that Fulham have. So I think there's a way to bring in players. I absolutely do that can impact the team. It's now, Tony. Would you agree with me?
I would agree with you. If we've got any aspirations of even dreaming or thinking about European football, then we have to invest in January. There's no question. I don't know where Fulham stand with the FFP rules and all of that stuff. Obviously, everything comes down to players' wages, players wanting to leave clubs that they're at, getting astronomical wages and taking, pay cuts and all of that. It's not a question of whether Fulham can afford it or not. It's just about, identifying, and it's not just going willy-nilly and bringing in players, Russ. It's about bringing in the right players. And I believe that there are 2 or 3 gems out there that are available, that can be available. And yeah, I don't want to see Fulham sitting back, resting on their laurels, thinking, we'll wait till the summer. If we invest correctly in January and bring in the right personnel, we've got a very good opportunity of kicking on and getting that 6th, 7th spot, and also we possibly even going on an FA Cup run. So I think they have to take it very seriously, and just by going into January and just sort of sitting back and waiting to see what happens, just isn't there. Marco Silva needs to be back, and I'm sure he's sitting there having conversations with them now about all of this. But there are 2 or 3 players out there available now that we should be all over, 100%.
Right. And I mentioned a name to you and on the last show, and I even saw speculation today, Tony, of Fulham being linked to Oscar Bob. I think Oscar Bob is the ideal player that we're talking about for me. And you talk about Brennan Johnson. For me, I'm going Oscar Bob because, again, I look at the team that he plays for. I see the situation that he's in. Playing for his country, he needs to play football regularly. Down the pecking order, they might bring in Semenyo. That's what I've been hearing. If they bring in Semenyo, then Oscar Bob potentially could be gone. So then it becomes who wants him. I've seen Crystal Palace and some Spanish teams. That's the speculation. So for me, it should be a player like that comes from a team like you said, Tottenham, a team like Man City that the quality is there. And I've already seen the quality. Put him in with Fulham. And again, I look at it a little bit like Emile Smith-Rowe. It's there. His situation is that there are just too many players ahead of him. Young player, 22 years old. Again, young player. That's the type of player I want Fulham to get. But I think it's imperative that they invest in January. Over to you, Suhail. I want to get your thoughts. So you and I have talked about this.
Yeah, I mean, clearly they have to invest in January. And in fact, the dealings that take place in January will tell you a lot about what's going to happen with Marcus Silva. Because if they don't invest in January, that they think Silva's going, so they're not going to do it. If they do invest in January, I think that is an indication that they're willing to spend because Silva has said, you spend in January, and I like the signings, I'm staying. So that'll be a very, very good indication. I totally agree with Wayne when he says we have to act early. We do have to act early. We have to get a striker in ASAP. And if that means terminating the Kusiasari loan, that's fine. Go ahead and do it. Just get a proper striker in to take the weight off Raul and someone who can actually sort of for me, the big thing is holding the ball up. Where there is no outlet. And I've been on this before where we try and get rid of it. We try and push the ball up and Raul cannot hold it. It just comes all the way back to us. The striker is imperative. Tony, if we could get Brennan Johnson, my God, that would be an earth shaker for me because I think that guy has got so much potential. And again, it's he needs to get rid of that Tottenham. If there's any players looking at Tottenham, they should look at all of these players and just say avoid like the plague. So we need to invest. We need to get the right players. Striker, please, definitely. And hey, if Brennan Johnson somehow becomes available, I would spend the purse on him because I think Marcus Silva could turn him into a world beater. He's that good. He is.
So I'm glad that Tony brothers, let's just stress, there's no speculation for Brennan Johnson, but if someone's listening from the club, how about Brennan Johnson? Okay, that's the way I'm looking at it. That's why I want Tony to keep talking about it.
Tony's his agent. Act on He's not told you this. He's his agent.
Yeah, I'm on 20%, so I want to get it through.
Okay, but in all seriousness, there's no speculation. So I'm trying to encourage the club by continue to talk about it because Tony's right though. And the problem with the players that, as you said, that go to Tottenham, they get ruined. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a good player there. We've seen it with Ryan Sessegnon. I've seen it with too many players that go there. They get ruined. And I think Brennan Johnson is one of those players. So I'm glad that Tony's talking about it. Again, shout out, like I said, for me, like I said, Oscar Bob. Another name I saw, guys, I don't think Fulham can get this player. And I just will vouch for him because I've seen him play several times. And he is a striker. He's playing with PSV Eindhoven. There is speculation that Fulham would potentially put in another bid for Ricardo Pepi. Now, he is an American striker, but I'm telling you, he is the real deal. He will play in the Premier League. I will tell you, he does score goals. He has a knack for goal. He reminds me, he's like a striker version for me of Ryan Sessegnon. A knack for goal. He's that type of striker. I would definitely do it, but I don't think Eindhoven are going to let him go, but we shall see. But that's what's good. But again, Paul is saying we're saying The Cons need to wake up and spend to keep Marco. As you said, that could be a factor with that. Let's see. Oh, and let's see. Gary says, did hear Crystal Palace are in for Johnson, unfortunately, but that doesn't mean that Fulham can't go in for him either.
They've actually got a better chance than Palace, because what everyone's forgetting about Palace is that Glasner's gone at the end of the summer.
Yeah,
so a player's really going to go there thinking this manager is not going to be around, and it's 90% of what Palace are doing are because of him. If he goes, I think they're not going to be. So we've got a decent chance. I just wish Marco would sign that contract. I really do, and then we could forget about the uncertainty.
It's about what these players want as well, Suhail. Do they want to carry on just sitting on the bench, watching their careers just dwindle away? Someone like Oscar Bob and Brennan Johnson would be a perfect fit for Fulham.
Yeah, that's right.
And the fact that also we've got Harry Wilson, who knows Brennan Johnson very well from the Wells, camp and stuff like that. And I just think that when you've got, when you're looking at realistically what players are going to come in, those are the kind of players that Fulham should be looking at.
Exactly.
They are, they're still young, so it brings the age group of the club down. They're players that you can, spend 2-3 years working with to progress and work the club, forward. And they just tick a lot of boxes. Yep. Obviously, as we know, it's all about wages and transfer.
Yeah, we have no idea how much
at the end of the day, they're realistic, because when you start talking about other players and other teams, it's all fantasy world, because it's not realistic. Yes. So I just think that hopefully the scouting teams, the Carnes, Silva have all got their ducks in a row, and they're ready to rock and roll. In January early, like Wayne said, get it done early.
Totally agree. I do want to mention that Oscar Bob is a Norway international, and we happen to have one too. So keep that in mind as well. So maybe there's an in there. Who knows? But again, the time is now. And as we're talking about, Wayne said, everyone is saying, get it done early. And for those who want Marco to stay, this is the best way to do it. Get the players he wants and make it difficult for him to leave. So that, to me, if that's what you truly want, like I said, I have a different view on it. That's just my view. But for the Fulham supporters that want Marco long-term, the Cons have to invest in January. They absolutely do. And that's a great way to segue to now. Great discussion on the Cottage talking points, but it is time to move on. Okay, coming up next, we're going to talk about the match itself. We'll talk about the starting 11. We'll end with man of the match. Okay, guys, let's talk about the match itself. Let's start with the starting 11. We all saw it 75 minutes before, but actually the club didn't release it on X right away, but Jack Kelly had it, and it was the right starting 11. It was an unchanged side. So, Hal, what were your thoughts when you saw the starting 11?
Yeah, no surprises. I thought probably the best we could put out at the moment. I was more interested in the subs bench to see who was on, who was going to be waiting to come on. I was pleasantly surprised. I like Issa Diop a lot. I think he's a decent defender, and I'm glad he was on there. No real surprises on starting 11. I thought that's the best we can do. And again, I sort of shrugged my shoulders and thought, okay, let's just see how this works.
Okay, excellent. All right. Over to you, Tony. What were your thoughts about the starting 11?
Yeah, I mean, as I expected. So no surprises, whatsoever. So yeah, pretty much bang on.
Okay, very good. All right, let's get to talking about the first half. So let's go to our first half analysis. So, Tony, I'll start with you. Just give me your overall thoughts on what you watched in the first half. There were a few moments early on, but Fulham had some moments early on. So what did you make of Fulham? And we'll start with the early stages in the first half. Again, created a couple of opportunities.
Yeah, look, I mean, not a lot happened, Russ, really, did it? I mean, it was literally two teams that were struggling to find any momentum. We passed the ball relatively well at times, gave the ball away as we did, and it just the theme seemed to follow on from Forest the other night, really. Ebbed and flowed backwards and forwards. Neither keeper in the first half, in fact, in the whole 90 minutes, had really much to do, is the honest truth. other than Harry Wilson's little blaster from outside the box, which, Areola tipped over. There wasn't anything I can really remember substantial in that first half really happening, other than the fact that I thought defensively, we looked really good for a change. I know we've already spoken about it, but the way that we were holding the offside was really, really good. Like Cuenca was stepping, up rather than back, trusting himself to get those decisions right. And in the main, it frustrated West Ham massively. And I was sitting there thinking, second half, if Marco Silva can take the handbrake off a little bit, and I was thinking maybe, remove one of Sanderberg or Sasha Lukic and get a Kearney on or a Josh King on, just to give us that little bit more, explosion in the second half, that we could actually go and win this game. And as it so happens and transpired, it did, not in the way that I wanted it to, but we did get that moment of that we needed. And yeah, that was where I was at on it. But the first half was pretty much, backwards and forwards, but not really much going on.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I saw as well. Suhail, give me your analysis of the first half. Like I said, there were a few moments early, but really it was just not much really to talk about.
Two teams nullifying each other, and we had a couple of good moments. The Wilson one that Tony's referred to, the Anderson shot, which I thought was an extremely bizarre save from Areola. I've never seen that before, where Wilson actually, to his credit, actually almost jumped in and put the ball in the net from the rebound. A couple of scares on our end. I think the worst one was Magassa. Basically, the ball just, I don't know what happened. It sort of just passed by him. All he had to do was stick his leg out. It would have been 1-0 West Ham, but we did have a couple of scares. What really I found quite pleasant was the way the defense was working. There were 2 or 3 chances West Ham had. The crowd was wooing and eyeing, and then all of a sudden the offside flag was going up. When Jared Bowen sort of put just wide, or there was a save, then all of a sudden it wouldn't have counted anyway. So not a great first half. I thought we were the better side, and we had more sort of like, we seemed a bit more threatening than they did, but generally a bit of a snore fest, but enough for me to say, well, we've not conceded. Let's just now go and score in the second half, and we can carry the 3 points.
Okay. All right, guys, let's transition to the second half. And what's interesting, like, Suhail, I'll go to you, because again, some of the stuff I was listening to was talking about that from the West Ham perspective, that Nuno was looking at, say, Callum Wilson to keep it close and then bring Callum Wilson to score the goal to win the match, but it didn't work out that way. It kind of felt that way because you have Callum Wilson come on, changes the game for them. They start creating opportunities. It just didn't work out that way. But I want to get your thoughts of, before we talk about how Fulham won the match, we're going to spend some time with that. I want to, leading up to that all that time beforehand, what did you think of Fulham's performance in dealing with, say, their change? Because now you have Nuno making changes and they were getting more control, but they were creating more opportunities. Didn't lead to anything.
Yeah, well, they had a couple of big opportunities, right? They had the Jared Bowen one that went for the first 15 minutes, second half. West Ham actually came to life, and that the Callum Wilson change did not hurt them one bit. They started to attack more regularly. Bowen moved out to the wing, which I think is his best position. Wilson began to cause problems by hassling Anderson and Cuenca. He had that chance where he shot from the angle, which went by. Which went wide. Bowen had that chance that sort of flashed across the goal. Yep. And at that point, I thought, what are we doing? Why are we, we've now let West Ham back into this game, and they may well take the lead. And thankfully, I think someone, the cool heads around the Fulham team, everyone started to say, hold the ball. And you could see the team, maybe it was Silva from the touchline, but what I noticed was after about 15 minutes, Fulham started passing the ball around at the back. And it became, and large parts of the game here, it was hard to tell who was the home team, because it was like we were the ones doing all the possession and West Ham's chances were all coming on the break, as opposed to them dominating us and us trying to break. And I think what the best thing we did prior to the goal was really just maintain possession of the ball, and it took the sting out of West Ham's attack. And then we had a couple of chances ourselves, the Lukic chance and the Raul chance, and the one that flashed right across the goal. But
right before.
So we started, and that all came about because Fulham took the sting out of West Ham's attack by holding the ball, keeping it, and frustrating them, and then attacking. So yeah, as the half wore on, the first 15 minutes I was a bit alarmed. As the half wore on, I became more reassured, and I thought if there was one team that's going to win, it's going to be us. So that was my honest thought.
Okay, great. Over to you, Tony. I want to get your analysis all the way up to we're going to talk about the goal separately, but feel free to share your thoughts. Suhail gave his thoughts leading up to all that before the goal. Give me your thoughts in the second half.
Yeah, Suhail makes some brilliant points there. And the point that he's alluding to at that moment where we sort of took our foot off the brake was when I think Marco Silva gave instructions to Sasa Lukic and sort of told him to stop sitting so deep and become a little bit more progressive. And I don't know if you noticed, but for sort of just after 10 minutes when we were so passive at the start of the second half, I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, we are literally going to open ourselves up here to get to losing this 1-0 if we don't, get on it. And I think Silva recognised that Berger and Lukic were sitting far too deep. And I believe, well, it looked like to me that he'd given the instruction to say, right, Sander Berg, you sit slightly deeper. Lukic, you get on and go and affect the game. And as soon as he stepped out of that sort of central holding midfield position and started to press, suddenly we were back on the front foot and we were getting at them. And then obviously Marco Silva made the first change and a lot later than he normally does, around 69 minutes. And I think taking Kevin off and bringing on Josh King actually changed the whole, game for us. But obviously, for West Ham's point of view, Nuno must have been sitting there thinking, why the hell didn't I start Callum Wilson from the get-go? It made no sense. I mean, the minute he came on, Suhail's absolutely right. He started to cause our two centre-halves problems, as centre forwards do, because Callum Wilson knows how to play in that position. Jared Bowen is a good, very good player, but he's not centre forward. He's a winger. So the minute he brought Callum Wilson on, there was a moment where, he got in between Cuenca and Anderson, and we defended that moment really poorly. And actually, he should have made more of that opportunity than he did. And I think that was the wake-up call at that moment. And then, as Suhail says, bringing Josh King on actually gave us so much more energy. And, suddenly West Ham had a different problem to deal with.
Okay, very good. All right. So that's all going to lead up to, and I'm glad that Suhail already mentioned this, because the lead up to the goal, Fulham were the ones pressing at that point. They were the ones more likely at that point later on to score because they had the opportunity. I'm talking about Fulham with Raul, but it was more than that. So, Tony, I'll go to you. I want to get your thoughts on the goal. And Suhail and I, if Suhail was listening or watching what I was listening, there's going to be all kinds of, like from the West Ham perspective, I hate to say it, but they're blaming this poor kid because he played a good game, and they're blaming him. That's like it's his fault, but it's really for the goal. But I look at it differently. This had more to do with Fulham than it did with West Ham's defending. Do you agree with me or disagree on that? But I think it's a wonderful goal for Fulham.
This is the Premier League, Russ, and unfortunately, mistakes, more often than not, get punished. And I feel for the lad. He's taken an air shot. He's panicked in that situation. But look, he'll learn from it, and that's what young players do. They learn from it. Fortunately for Fulham, it was one of those moments that Harry Wilson showed a lot of composure, because again he could have thrashed at that any time and done something completely different. But he had the sound mind to take that touch, put it back across, and like I said, it was just great to see Raul in the right place. And he works so hard for this team, and I don't think he gets enough praise for what he does for us. Everyone's saying we need a new centre forward, we need this, but we do, but don't get away from the fact that Raul actually does a lot for this Fulham team. He gives us so much more than people really realise. And yesterday, as I said, he occupied the box a lot more than he usually does. And so obviously he was in the right position. And again, it wasn't an easy header because he could have panicked in that moment, rushed it, but he took his time, fell to him, picked his spot, And, it was a great goal. And actually, at that point in the game, we deserved it.
Yeah.
So,
definitely.
it was a good moment, really good moment.
Definitely. Suhail, do you feel like, Tony, that
Yeah.
well, you already said it, that Fulham deserved.
No, they did, but what people are forgetting is, or not people, what people should remember is that move started with a really incisive through pass by Joachim Andersen. He's the guy that put that ball through for Wilson for the first attempt. The first attempt gets blocked, comes back, and then you have that poor guy, Oliver Scarles, who does that sort of air kick, misses it completely, and it allows Wilson again to pick up the ball and put it into Raul. And here's the difference between the sides, guys. That guy, Scarles, where after that goal on TV, he collapses to the ground.
Yeah.
He's absolutely devastated. Did you see any West Ham player go over to him and say, hey, you remember that time Josh King screwed up? I can't remember against which team it was. He screwed up, and
he was crying after the match. He was crying.
Yeah, it was terrible. But when Josh King did it earlier on the season, every player went up behind him and said, "You know what? Forget it. Let's get on with this." I didn't see any West Ham player do that. They just sort of turned their heads and walked back to the centre circle.
There you go.
It was a great header by Raul. And I'm with Tony. He brings a lot to the side in terms of effort. I just don't think he's the starting striker that we need at this point. I think we need someone who can hold the ball up. But that was a great header, great goal. Earlier on, Sasha Lukic had an opportunity where a cross had come in and he missed. And I was thinking, God, it's a shame Raul wasn't on the end of that one. He would have put that away because it was a great opportunity. It's a bit similar to the Lukic goal at Newcastle. So I just thought when we scored, we deserved it. The momentum was with us. And crucially, I never felt West Ham were going to equalise after we scored. There wasn't a moment where I got nervous. I just thought, hey, what the heck?
And I'm glad that you said that. I think that's a great way to end before we go to man of the match. Tony, what Suhail says is true. West Ham offered nothing after that. Do you put that more down to Fulham or more down to West Ham?
No, I think you put it down to Marco Silva, making the right changes to see the game out. And that's what he did. He, Sergio alluded to it earlier in the show about, shutting shop and seeing the game out. And what better way then to bring on, as you said, a former player comes on and what Silva's saying is right. You haven't been able to break us down the whole game. You're not going to be able to break us down now. And it's good to see, the football intelligence there is that we don't need to go gung-ho. We've won the game. Just see it out. And that's exactly what we did. And, I think that however poor, people think West Ham were yesterday, you've got to credit Fulham for making them, look so poor at times. And we did that. We nullified a lot of their, sort of influential players. We just didn't allow them to play. Bowen, we kept pretty quiet. He was always a threat, but he never really did anything because we dealt with him. So you've got to credit, the players for doing that.
Okay, very good. All right, guys, time to end the show with man of the match. Who is your man of the match?
I would. Harry Wilson was the person that stood out for me, and I know it's he's sort of a regular man of the match recently, but he was the guy that I thought really did well. If it wasn't going to be Wilson, it would be Joachim Andersen for me. I thought he led the line really well, was everywhere, won pretty much every aerial challenge, and was feisty enough to show that Fulham really wanted that win. So, as I say, Wilson for me, closely followed by Anderson. Yeah, you're right. Colm, Robinson as well could have been in it. Cuenca could have been in it, but I'll stick with Harry Wilson. I don't want to be like my brother. I'll stick with Harry Wilson on this.
Please do not go on the fence. I've got the better brother today. So.
Yeah, you're right. The smarter brother.
Smarter brother. Okay. I love. Come on. We know we just.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
We just like to pick on Kamal. That's all it is. Okay. Tony, who is your man of the match?
I've got three players, Russ, and one of them might surprise you, but I don't think we can underestimate actually how integral Emil Smith Rowe. And we haven't really mentioned him at all.
We haven't really talked about him.
He was integral in all of our good play yesterday. He really was. And And a lot of what he did went unnoticed because there wasn't much end product. But I thought he was excellent yesterday. Anthony Robinson, I thought, was outstanding. The amount of times he bombed up that left side and caused West Ham endless issues, in their final third was fantastic to see. But for me, I have to give it to Cuenca, just simply because since he's come in, he's settled us down defensively. I believe we look a lot more composed, a lot more calm, and I think and 2 clean sheets is enlarged down to him coming in and being that influence. So for me, it's Cuenca.
Okay, and I understand that, and I understand all the comments. I'm going to give it to Raul because I think I want to give it to him because of how hard he works and he gets the goal. It's set up for him, but Raul works really hard, as you've said, Tony. I want to give it to Raul. So for me, it's going to go to Raul Jimenez. All right. Okay, great show. Final thoughts before we go, guys. We'll wrap it up.
I think we're in a very good position now. I do think 13 points clear of the relegation zone. We've got everything to look forward to rather than be looking over our shoulders anymore. Just hoping for a good transfer window. And my New Year's resolution is I would hope Sander Berge develops the confidence to shoot from distance because the amount of time, you know what's going to happen, right? He gets the ball and he looks left and then he looks right. And I'm thinking, no, ahead, man, ahead. So hopefully that's my New Year's resolution. Sander Berge, please take a shot from outside the box. You can do it. We know you can.
Okay. Tony, to you.
Yeah, I think, listen, it's great going into the new year feeling a little bit more relaxed, Russ, but obviously now's not the time to rest on our laurels. We have to make sure that we make all of these results count. Not the most classic performances the last 2 games, maybe a little bit passive for me at times and reactive. But look, ultimately, we've got to go to Palace full of confidence, take the game to them, and build on what Silva's done and what's put us in a great position. And 2 more positive results, and I don't want to say it, but we'll be not far off 5th or 6th. So
okay, Tony, don't do this.
Very exciting, Russ.
Okay, I know. For you, I mean, you are really excited. I mean, I'm like, okay. The one I'll end with this, and it goes back to the talking point I had before. To Tony's point, it's funny. I will say this: Fulham owe Crystal Palace big time. I would not count them out of this match. I have a good feeling about it. It could be dead wrong, but I have a good feeling. I think at Selhurst Park it's completely different because the mentality of Crystal Palace will be different. I think Fulham have a good chance to get all 3 points. I'll say that right now. But for me, my focus not only on the matches itself, it's going to be what will the Cons do. And with that, I've already talked about on the Cottage Talk talking points. What will the Cons do? And if they do something, they need to do it early, as we said. Please give Marco the players he needs to take Fulham to Europe. How about that? That's how I'm ending the show.
I'd just like to wish Happy New Year to all of the people watching.
I did it again. I didn't do Merry Christmas. Happy Christmas.
At all. You're a passionate guy, Russ, and you like to talk about football, so it's easy to know I forget. If we do get Brennan Johnson, I think we should all be asking Tony what his commission was. That's
right.
That's the final point of this show.
Not as much as it should be. Let's put it that way.
He's the secret agent. He's the secret agent of Brennan Johnson. We're just kidding, but it's a good thing for Tony to share that with us. All right. Wonderful show. I want to wish everyone a happy new year, but it is time to go. For Suhail and Tony, I'm Russ Coleman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, part of the Talk Sport Fan Network.